And I have a successful cash-based physical therapy practice. And this video is going to focus on how to make the best hires, how to find the best candidates and make sure that you're making good hires, how to semi-automate the beginning of that process to save yourself a ton of time and stress, some really key strategies when it comes to training and onboarding of staff, and then finally how to fill their schedules as quickly as possible. So this topic is so important. Most people don't know that even if you're a really small business, making a bad hire will likely cost you in the six figures. This is like an established stat out there. It's been studied up and down, but likely at least in the six figures, a bad hire will cost you, especially if you hold on to that person for at least 6 months. And so if you think about it, it's like not just salary, which is obviously a big cost, but the additional insurance you need, the taxes you pay, work comp, etc. But what a lot of people also don't think about is the fact that if you have a subpar employee, whether it's front desk or back desk or treating staff, any one of those employees can provide a subpar customer experience that really damages your practice. It damages your reputation, not just to the people that they talk to, but also the referral source that sent them to you. So that it can have just an incredible amount of financial impact. So that's why this is so important, and it's so important to listen to all of these steps, because I'm going to go through exactly what I do when I'm looking to hire someone new, as well as some really important things that I've learned along the way and that I've taught others to do as well. Now, if you're doing this right, the hiring process really should start way before you actually need to hire for that position. At the very end of this, I'm going to come back to that concept and explain exactly what I mean. But this video and this topic was brought or the reason I'm doing this video, as with a lot of videos these days, is that this topic was brought up by one of my cash practice mastermind members, and he is in the position right now to hire a physical therapist. And just, I took a lot of notes on this, and so if I'm looking down at them, it's just, please excuse me, it's just that I don't want to forget any of the stuff that I came up with and make sure that you get it all. So he's in a position to hire, and he had some very common questions and concerns about the process. First and foremost, how do I find the best people and make sure that I'm, making a good hire? And then, of course, in our professions, in the healthcare professions, when you're hiring a treating staff member, usually they're commanding a pretty solid salary. So until they are, seeing enough patients and producing enough revenue to cover their expenses, it can be, a decent loss. And so it's a valid concern, and I want to address that here as well, not just about how to view that situation, but also some ways to quickly get enough business on their schedule. And of course, that really has to do with marketing and bringing business in and all the other strategies that I teach elsewhere. That's a little outside of the scope of this video, but specific to how you can kind of hype up and promote that new hire once you've hired them, and even before you've hired them. I'm going to give you some good strategies for that. So let's dive in. First and foremost, I have an automatic or a semi-automated system that I came up with to weed out candidates who can't follow simple directions and obviously aren't showing attention to detail, which for me is just hugely important. And so I actually created and walk you through in some videos step by step how to do this. But the general idea is that you can use Gmail filters and Google Forms to take them through the process that I've used. And so essentially, when first I create a landing page on my website that's a job description, and I'm not going to get into the details of how to make a great job description, but that's there on my website. I'm driving traffic to it from sending out emails to all my former clients, social media organic posts, as well as paid social ads. I put it up on Craigslist, Indeed, Monster. So we get a lot of traffic to this job description. And at the bottom, I say, don't just hit reply if they're on like Indeed or Craigslist. Don't just hit reply. I want you to send an email to this email address with this specific subject line. Include your resume as a PDF attachment, and also include a link to your LinkedIn profile. And through setting up Gmail filters, automatically anyone that doesn't follow those directions gets filtered and put into a folder that I set up for people that there's no way I'm going to even spend time looking at their resumes, right? And those that do all those things, they get an automatic response that then takes them to the Google form, which is essentially a written interview. It's a questionnaire. It's a pretty in-depth questionnaire. And I even have a few tasks at the end where I have them, well, it depends on the position I'm hiring for, but some tasks specific to, not too hard to do quickly. You're not asking them to do some huge project, but some things where you can really check out the characteristics and the skills they have, and make sure that those fit with the position that you're trying to fill. And so only at that point do I start to look at a candidate. And if they don't have good writing skills, or I'm not crazy about their answers, I still don't have to go back and look at their resume and their email. So what I found is that at least 50, usually more than 50% of the people who are interested in the job are weeded out and never even get to the written interview. And then when a lot of them see, well, I've got to spend probably an hour or more, filling this thing out, I'm not going to deal with that. Well, I don't want that kind of candidate either, right? I want someone who's willing to put in a little bit of work to set themselves apart if they're really interested in working for me. And so that's kind of the upfront automated part. And then once we get to, I'm just going to scroll down my notes here. Once we get past that point, I'll usually have at least a handful of people that I want to take on to the next stage, which is the phone interview. And from those, it's amazing. Sometimes I've been super impressed with their resume and their written interview, and they get on the phone and it's not a nervousness thing. It's just like, I can tell this is just not a good fit. So before spending time meeting them at the clinic, do a phone interview. Then the finalists will go to an in-person interview. And at that in-person interview, other than going through the interview, I also have them fill out a motivator index form. And that's something a friend shared with me. And I think it's easy to find out there, but essentially I'm just going to switch over and I'll read you some of it here. Well, I'm not finding it. Anyhow, it says it's like 14 different things, everything, stuff like compensation, manager, time with manager, being recognized publicly, being recognized in writing, all these different things that they have to rank from 1 to 14 as to how much they motivate that candidate. And it's really brilliant because you can not only get an idea if it's a type of person that you want to work with, but if they do end up being your candidate, you know exactly what's most important to them on a day-to-day or over time basis to make sure that they stay motivated, they stay productive, and that they want to remain part of your team. So we do that at the in-person interview. And then the finalists, the final finalists, I have them come out to happy hour or dinner with me and the rest of the team. I make sure that my wife is there, and I have them invite, if they have a significant other, that they bring them, because the way they interact. Also, I like to see the way people are in social settings, the way they interact, not just with my staff, but also have my wife there, because she's super intuitive. She can kind of get a feel for people probably better than I can. And so having a lot of different eyeballs on the situation and then getting that feedback afterwards is also really important for making a solid decision, because of course, this person is going to be, if you have other staff, is going to be working with them too. So you want to make sure that that's a good fit as well. All right. So that's the process that we go through. And at the end of it, we have a really, really solid candidate that hopefully after negotiations accepts the position. And the next part I'd like to talk about is going back to this idea of the fear of them not producing revenue. Let's, in the instance of it being a physical therapist, how do we get their schedule, not just get their schedule full quickly, but I really want people to consider that they shouldn't be focusing on that as much as they should focus on really solid training. Because even if you spend a little extra time training to make sure it's done right, and that means up front you lose a little bit of money, a little more money than you would have if you just threw them into some patient care and didn't really train them deeply, you will lose more money over time and have more stress and headaches over time if you don't take the time to train them appropriately. Make sure that is top priority above just immediately just throwing them to the wolves, so to speak, if you can fill their schedule, and just having them do a ton of patient care and diving right into a bunch of paperwork without taking them through exactly how you want patients to be treated, how you want, I mean, just anything and everything that you do on a daily basis that you want to pass on to that person. You've got to sit them down and take them through it. And what I would also suggest, and it's a bit of work up front, but it's amazingly helpful long term, is if you document ahead of even bringing on your next staff member, document all of those things, anything and everything you do throughout the day. Just start making a list of the things that you would want to train that next person. This is how we greet people. This is how, this is where this goes. This is this administrative task that you're going to be helping with. This is a marketing task that you're going to be helping with. And this is how I want it done. This is how I want the patients positioned for comfort. This is how I want them spoken to at the beginning and the end of each session to make sure that they continue to come back and don't drop off the schedule. This is how you would follow up with them if you get an email saying I need to cancel, and making sure they get back on the schedule. And this is who you talk to about that. I mean, there's just, the list goes on and on and on. So if you can document those things up front and start to literally create task lists, and videos are great when applicable, and appropriate to show them all these things. So if you have a lot of that set up or all that set up ahead of time, they come in, man, it is going to save so much time. And then you can go back and review each topic and each kind of strategy or concept that you've passed on with them after the fact. So you make sure it's really, really well set in. Another component of training is remember that training never stops. Who remembers everything the first time or the second time they hear it? So it has to be a continual thing that you take people through, the high level strategies and systems and ways of doing things. You've got to continue to come back to them over and over and over, even at the risk of sounding repetitive. I do that all the time. You've got to continue to train your staff in regular meetings and in services. Okay, now we talked about automating the staff training and onboarding as much as possible. Last part of that before we talk about ramping up schedules. Just because someone isn't seeing a patient doesn't mean that they can't be immediately performing activities that add value to your business. Take things off your plate or off the plates of other staff members who are super busy. So make sure that you create a list and quickly train them on those things that they can be doing in the gaps in their schedule. And so that you feel like you're really getting something, at least, for every minute that you have them in the clinic, that they are producing something of value for your business, even if it's not a revenue act like treating a patient. Okay, so let's go back to when we actually are in the hiring process, because I think that ramping up their schedule and getting past clients or prospective clients excited about seeing that new hire, it happens at the very beginning of the hiring process. So I always email my full patient list and past client list, and all those who maybe weren't clients but they were leads. Everyone gets the email giving a description of exactly who I'm looking for. And it's a very exciting kind of description of, they're going to have these qualities. And not only will you find that people will forward those emails or pass that social post on to someone who might be interested, and you ask them to do that, you might find your next candidate. And I've in fact found candidates this way, through just asking them to forward to people that might be interested. But not just that, is that when you're describing it, you're describing it in a way, or that job description, or that the characteristics that they'll have, and they're thinking, man, this, Jared is going to hire an amazing person. And so that you plant that seed and you pre-frame them to know, like, I am going to find a total amazing therapist, and I would love your help if you could share this or, send it out to anyone that you think might be interested. So it's a way of getting candidates, but also pre-framing them about how great your new hire is going to be. Then along the way, as you're kind of, taking candidates and, weeding people out and getting, closer and closer to the end, you can do regular social posts or a few social posts saying, got some amazing candidates. It's going to be hard to choose, talk about obviously not identifying them, but just the great qualities. And then finally, again, and as people are seeing this, they're thinking, wow, this is great. Not only did he find a great candidate, he found a great candidate that beat out a ton of other great people, right? So this is all a way to kind of ramp up and hype up this person. So finally, when you're ready to say, hey, this is who I found, it's not the first time they hear about it. And we're talking, in emails or even paper, direct mail, and of course, social media posting. So at that point, You got to make a huge deal out of this new hire, not just their credentials and their experiences, and certainly, talk about those things, but just making a huge deal, fanning it out on every form of media that you can think of: email, social media, blogs, direct mail, and definitely video if the candidate is comfortable enough to do some videos, but some videos where you're introducing them to your past client list, or anyone else happens to be watching it on YouTube, and make it personal. I mean, maybe make sure that they're okay with fielding some of the questions ahead of time, but don't just make it about physical therapy and about their background and where they're coming from and what they're specialized in. You might mention some of those things here and there, but asking them questions that will make people relate to them on a personal level. Tell us about your family. What's your favorite hobby? What's the craziest thing a patient's ever said during one of your treatment sessions? Make it fun and entertaining and get them to show their personality a bit, because that is way more impactful than the credentials behind their name. When it comes to someone picking up the phone and calling and saying, "I want to see your new person, your new therapist," it's going to be because you got them to talk in a way and talk about things that someone connected to on a personal or emotional level. It's not because, they just got certified in dry needling and they're, great pelvic health specialists or whatever, that stuff's important to mention, but you got to make it personal and entertaining and get them to show their personality. And always, always end all of those forms of media that you're sending out and fanning out in front of everyone with a call to action of, this new therapist is ready to help, the viewers, the listeners, the readers, to get back to the active lifestyle that they deserve, or whatever your niche is, applying it to your niche. Always put in that call to action. And I would add, and if you know anyone who could benefit from working with someone with these skills and getting back to this certain lifestyle, or dealing with a certain situation or pain or syndrome or whatever, then feel free to forward them this video or this email or whatever the case may be. You'll probably get a few people to do that with those calls to actions. Very, very important to ask them to do those things. Okay, we're coming up on the end here. So finally, what I mentioned in the beginning is that if you're doing it right, if you're doing what the best private practices out there doing, you are not just looking frantically for good candidates when it's like time to hire and you're overbooked and booked out. Because in general, people, there's a saying that goes, hire slow, fire fast. Most people do the opposite. Most business owners wait till they've really got to find someone. They're in a rush to hire. And then when they've realized that it wasn't the best, candidate, they keep them around for way too long. So you got to flip it around, and you got to be really slow and methodical about your hiring process. Make sure they have to go through a big process, and you're really, really confident. And one of the best ways to do that is to have great candidates lined up and ready before you actually have to hire. People will still be working, but if you have a good reputation of being a great place to work, as most cash-based practices do compared to the mill clinics out there, there'll be plenty of people that would love to be contacted when you have a position open. So if you're constantly using that automated system that I described above to kind of get people through those first phases, and if you're not hiring, you just says, we're not hiring now, but we're always interested in connecting with talented therapists. And so please do, fill out this questionnaire. And when we're hiring, we will reach out to you first. And so if you have those things set up on your website, and maybe even, do an occasional social media post or even a Facebook ad or something like that, you can gather those great candidates and get through those first automated phases. And then when the time comes, you're not frantically trying to just gather a few candidates. You've got a bunch of great ones to choose from. And that is I promise you, it's an amazing position to be in. So if nothing else, even if you have a solo practice and you don't expect you'll hire for a long, long time, start to network, start to gather those resumes and those candidates so that when the time comes, you can really do it right. So now here's my call to action. One, if you are interested in being able to ask these kind of questions, bring up these kind of topics with me and get a personalized response, live Q&A calls every week, private Facebook group, check out drjaredcarter.com/mastermind to see if our cash practice mastermind would be a good fit for you and your needs. So check that out. And if you have any questions on this specific topic, feel free to drop them in the comments below. Thanks.